Broad Street Review podcast is an extension of Broad Street Review, Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation, an online arts and culture journal covering the greater Philadelphia area. I'm your host, Darnell Radford. Today on the podcast, Dr. Kimmika L.H. Williams-Witherspoon talks about the dramaturgy for Theater Exile's Philadelphia premiere of The Light by Loy A. Webb and the state of African American education as we celebrate Black History Month. Here is my interview with Dr. Kimmika L.H. Williams-Witherspoon. And welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Darnell Radford, and today I am in the virtual studio with the incomparable Dr. Kimmika L.H. Williams-Witherspoon. Your name is such a mouthful, but it is such a pleasure to say. I'm just going to say Dr. Kimmika.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. This is kind of wonderful. So
Yes. Welcome to the podcast. So listeners, in full disclosure, I am the general manager of Theater Exile. We are producing The Light by Loy A. Webb, and Dr. Kimmika is the dramaturg for The Light. And I thought it'd be great, because of where we are in the world right now in this time frame, to actually talk to the dramaturg about all of the foundational things that help bring the light to light.
To light, right?
Yes. But first, we are going to learn a little bit about Dr. Kimmika. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Born and raised here in Philadelphia. Went to Gompers Elementary, to Beaver Junior High, and then to the Philadelphia High School for Girls. And that was long before females were allowed to go to Central. Excuse me. I apologize if I cough during this interview. I've been dealing with a cold for a little over a month. In my time here in the Philadelphia public school system, that's why I think I'm so drawn to this particular play. It was the Black teachers, the Black women in particular, who inspired me so much as a young student, and so that's what kind of really draws me in there. As some of you may know, I did my undergraduate degree in journalism at Howard University, and then many years later, after marriage and 2 children, I went back to graduate school at Temple University to do an MFA in playwriting, a graduate certificate in women's studies, a master's in anthropology, and then finally my doctorate in anthropology. And I'm currently teaching as an associate professor of urban theater and community engagement at Temple University. And I'm also serving as president of Faculty Senate this year. This is my last year in that capacity, unless they make me run again.
I'm just going to say, get it? You can get it? Because that is such a wonderful CV.
Well, and that's just a little bit of it. I mean, I think I've always loved learning. And I think that's what I might have in common with Genesis, the main character, or one of the main characters of this 2-person play. It's, the idea that you can help shape a young person's world and give them opportunities and information where they can begin to see themselves succeed and excel. That's what's really wonderful about, what the education system is supposed to do for our children. Yeah. And as soon as I read the play, I was like, yeah, I know who this person is.
And that's all students.
All students.
Not just some, all.
All. That's right. That's right.
So in your words, tell us about The Light.
Well, it's a romantic comedy that takes a twist. 2 upwardly mobile young people who are madly in love come together for their anniversary, And you know, something really wonderful happens. You know, it kind of reminds me of yesterday, of Valentine's Day. You know, this
Hmm.
notion of how we love in our communities, and they've they've been without a partner for quite a while, but since finding each other, it seems as if they've found their better half in one another. And you fall in love with them being in love on stage. But somewhere in the middle of that, uh, there's a suggestion to go out and celebrate their anniversary, that they go to this concert that's being sponsored by a young rapper who's very successful, very powerful in the city of Chicago, and very well known. And then secrets unravel, are shared, and individuals are finally allowed to talk about um, some of the harsher truths or harsher realities about what it is to be a young African American man
Hmm.
in a world where you're navigating Black manhood, and not necessarily appreciated for what you bring to the table, and then especially what often has happened to so many of us young women, particularly Black women, that you become victimized or assaulted, and learn to live with it and never share that story. And so it's a beautiful story of love and sharing the difficult, the complex, and coming together.
Hmm. Yeah. And what was your? How did you feel after your first read?
I cried. I was on a plane coming back from Ohio with a friend, and I started crying in my seat.
Mm.
And my friend turned to me and said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Oh, it's so good." you know, um, that was the initial reaction. I just, I turned off my iPad and I kind of wiped the tears away, and I said, "Yeah, I got to do this." And
Yeah.
so that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Thanks to Deborah Block for asking.
Yes, I read this on the train coming back from New York,
Hmm.
and I don't know when on the route did I start reading it, but I I finished up right before we got to the 30th Street station, and
Hmm.
I needed a moment.
Yeah.
I was silent. My partner was with me, and I was like, Can you just give me a second?"
Yeah.
And I just had to breathe. My heart was racing, and I just
Hmm.
felt like I was like, "Wow, like what a gut punch."
Yeah.
I felt like the piece just it truly is a roller coaster ride.
It
And
is
I
indeed.
I never saw that description more relevant than in this moment. And I just said, "Wow, I think I'm gonna need a moment." I feel like the audience might need a moment, like everybody's just gonna hold each other tighter and on the way out, just think about and also think about how you are on uh how you've been in situations where you've been on opposing sides of a
Mm.
situation and very
Yes. How
similar to
quickly it
this.
could turn. You
Yeah.
know. Because we so often hear the story of a man who is unjustly accused of something,
Mhm.
or even justly accused, right? So either one of those two polar extremes. But mm, because of the world that we live in, we seldom think about what it is for what women have to kind of or deal with on a day-to-day basis, you
Mhm.
know, unless we have daughters or a sister. Um, sometimes we think about what our mothers may have to deal with going, public transportation to their jobs and so forth, but for the most part we just don't think about it unless somebody comes forward um, to report something, and then all of a sudden the national conversation is she telling the truth,
Mm.
as opposed to, we've got to do something to stop these kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's it was a gut punch. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what it was. And for so many of us, and I don't think this is just to Black women. I think this is to women in general. So many of us have had a similar experience.
Mm.
And depending upon your age, rather, what generation it is, coming forward was not always an option.
Mm.
And so I know individuals where you had to kind of suck that up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And live with it. You know, I just wrote a poem the other day in another class about that same thing happening to me.
Mm.
And it's just really quite interesting how many of us carry that memory, that scar, that secret, and
Yeah.
never share.
So why do you think that's the case?
Hmm.
If so many um, if so many women can relate, this isn't like a one-off thing. So
No,
why do we continue to approach the situation the same way?
because we live in a man's world. It's patriarchy, because good, bad, or indifferent, since I gave my students, in my graduate students, this week, because we were reading the Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. Um, I gave them Frederick Engels' article on the development of monogamy and marriage. From the time that it became expedient to keep women controlled and oppressed,
Mm.
um, that kind of victimization was part and parcel with that, I think. Now, this is just my point of view as a cultural anthropologist. In my own case, and I think this is the first time I've ever talked about it publicly, actually. In my own case, it was someone I knew and had dated. Um, and nobody believed me. So, what do you do? Well, like I said, we have secrets, we have scars, we have traumas that we hold.
Yeah.
What's different in this play, which starts off, as I said, as a rom-com. It's a romantic comedy that all of a sudden you go, wait, what just happened? And it's such in such a truncated amount of time, you're not even sure how the change happens.
Hmm.
But all of a sudden, everyone in the room is breathing in sync, and you could hear a pin drop. And I think a lot of it has to do do with having been in that circumstance or felt that way and not been able, capable, um, um, comfortable
Mm.
with sharing
Yeah.
their story.
Yeah, the thought is like, how did we get here? How did we get here so fast? You're right about the way it opens up. It almost feels like an episode of Martin uh, that that went
That's a
awry.
good one.
It's like there's that back and forth that they love each other because they're sort of jabbing at each other. They're going back and forth in this loving way, um, and then it's like, well, I've processed it so many times because I've heard it many times. I've heard it
Hmm.
over and over again, and I think about like, hmm, what was you know what did what was missed in the moment, like when you know Genesis says, oh, I don't want to go. um how is that like not heard? It's this is supposed to be a thing for them both, but they're both not on board. So
Right.
it's just like, okay, baby, we can do something else,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
but there's like this double down of it, that just forces a revelation.
But we can understand it. I mean,
Mhm.
I can think of it in terms of, so if there was a, oh, I don't know, some character who is super famous and super well known and probably even super respected on some level, that was coming into town, we'd all want to flock and go see, right? And if and in the play, the kashif, the character that we hear so much about, through these two individuals in their exchange, um, it's Sheaf, right? Kashif, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, he he's done so much publicly for the Black community
Mm.
in Chicago that we recognize that character and we're on board with that, because don't we want those individuals who have some level of fame and resource to give back to our community? So we're on board, and we absolutely understand when, um when the love interest wants to go to see this show. He's gone through great lengths to stage this proposal and their anniversary celebration months in advance, and this was the cherry on top in his
Yeah.
mind.
Mm.
um so when somebody doesn't appreciate all the effort of the cherry on top, you've got to convince them that this is a cherry. What's wrong with you? This is a cherry. And that's what we get to watch. And I when you said it was like an episode of Martin, I could see that, and I kind of tickled. But to me, that's just Black love.
Mhm.
I've seen those. I've seen that exchange with people I know. I've been part of that exchange with folks I've loved. It's the way we play with each other, um, when we're that close and that in tune. It has a little bit of that in it, that comedy and um, that battering back and forth. It was just really quite wonderful to watch, because we recognize ourselves in
Yeah.
those two characters. But when the change happens, when I don't want to go to see the show, to see the concert, we don't always hear, particularly the women who have reservations about something.
Mm.
And it's back again to the ways in which, um, women are have been, um, what's the right word, have been dismissed off. Sometimes we've been coddled to the point that we give in, um, because we don't like something, we don't want to do something, and it's hard for folks to hear a woman's objection
Mm.
for whatever reason. I think it goes back to this whole notion of marriage and monogamy and matrimony. But that's just because Frederick Engels is on my head right now. But yeah, the shift happens really quickly, and the rise of action to this climactic moment is because we have to literally be flayed open, crying in front of you, oftentimes, for you to hear us.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What did you notice about the dynamic of Genesis and Rashad as a couple that is not immediately on the surface?
How much he loves her. You think it's all comedy, and that it's just getting up close to your woman on your anniversary, but there's real love there. Um, and I think it comes out in some of the subtle nuances that the actor has,
Mhm.
the way his facial expressions when he responds to things that she says. Um, and then the thought, the thoughtfulness he's put into this moment it's not just a canned romantic moment, that he thought enough of this woman that he wrote the letter a year ago, on the day they came home from their first date, knowing what would happen, and kept it sealed, mailed it, kept it sealed. And everything that he felt for her was written in that letter from a year ago.
Mm.
That's really quite wonderful.
Yeah.
So that it elevates. We very seldom see Black male characters on stage who have that level of caring and thoughtfulness and genuine love for a sister.
Mm.
And that makes the piece so wonderful and warm until it isn't.
Yeah. And so the piece is kind of period, as
Yes,
in as it is not, it's not present day, but it's sort of like it's in this window of like the last 5 years or
right.
so. So in terms of like preparing, the dramaturgy packet,
Hmm.
to give them kind of the foundation of place setting where we are. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, 2018, 2017, what was happening in the world. So I had to know that. But then I also had to know, if they're, of this age in 2017, 2018, what was their youth like in the 1990s? So starting from the 1990s, thinking about place and location, going back to look at images of Chicago's neighborhoods. Um, uh, we're all very familiar with South Side, but they have very distinct neighborhoods, as we do here in Philadelphia. And sometimes it's the distinction between a West Philadelphia Black community and a South Philadelphia Black community. So that I needed to know what those nuances were and to situate them in their particular geographic space.
Mhm.
I wanted to know what play was like, and I read um, information about what it was like 80s, 90s in Chicago in the Black community. I talked about in my packet, because once you start thinking about the 80s and the 90s, well, then you have to think about their parents and the parents and where they would have come from, because most people who live in Chicago of a particular age, so that if their parents were, let's say, in the 80s, they were 80 or 90 years old, they moved in and migrated up from southern states. And so it gives you a particular feel. I happen to have really good friends and family in Chicago. So, I know the way they talk. It almost sounds as if they're Southern, but they're not, and a lot of that has to do to the northern migration that happened. So I incorporated some of that information in, so that the team knew who were the people who make Rashad and Genesis. The mother that Rashad talks about that's helping raise his daughter, the people who helped Genesis become this principal of this elementary and middle school. That you had to know their people in order to understand them, and then so on and so on. So I start with those kinds of historical journeys. Look, the images help me to really see the young people as young people, folks jumping rope, playing jacks in the streets, the parents sitting out on the stoops, gardens in the back of many of the row homes. Um, and then there's things that the author, the playwright, embedded in the piece, so references to artists and activists, and you go on a journey, a search to unpack who was Shirley Chisholm. We know the first African American, first African American to pledge to run for president, first Black woman to be seated in Congress. I mean, there's all of these firsts that are tied to Shirley Chisholm. Um, there are references to oh, I can't think of her name, just went out of my head that quickly. The sociology, well, she was a creative art creative writer, but wrote cultural and social studies. um she just recently passed away last year. Darn, I can't think of her name right now. It'll
Uh,
come to me.
Gloria?
um Say it again.
Is it Gloria
No.
or
Oh
Bell?
dear. Bell Hooks.
Yeah.
They're and she's one of the writers that when I went back to graduate school, I ate her books up. I mean, her talking about hip hop culture, her conversation, Black to the Bone is one of my favorites of hers. Her articles and her essays on Black feminism versus womanism. I mean, those are the kinds of things that Genesis would have read, would have been aware of, would have known about, and would have help her deal with the secret that she carried
Mm.
for the rest of her life. So you do that investigation, and you give the actors and the team a sense of place and space and history. Um, and then I think the other thing I was asked to think about, um, so that there would be a Black woman's perspective. What do you think about X, Y, and Z? And so I had to tell you, from my perspective, I have a unique perspective, as I said, in that I recognize that so many of us, so many women share that story, share that trauma, having been assaulted or victimized at some point in our lives. It's the nature of, I guess, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, being young, and also being a woman where you can be overpowered by someone else. I don't think that we're unique. I think that there are men who also have share those kinds of traumas as well. Um, but we very seldom talk about the Black woman's experience. And
Mm.
it was important to share my thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. I think I was uh I was focusing on, you know, as I walk away from it and I think about, both Genesis and Rashad serve the community,
Mm-hmm.
in their roles. Genesis, the principal, Rashad is a firefighter. And so I think about that. And, but then when you think about the economics of the two of them, um, Genesis is, for lack of a better word, above.
Yes, doing
Rash-
quite well financially.
Rashad, yeah, doing quite well. And so I I was thinking in my head, like, Rashad has to be aware of that all the time and feeling like,
Yeah.
I want to hold on. I want to hold on tight here.
Yeah, but I don't think that's why he holds on. I mean, I think first of all that speaks to another way that we can talk about the portrayal of Black manhood in this piece,
Hmm.
because even though there's some inequity in their financial status, he's doing well with what he's got,
Yes.
but he's okay with it. That she's the leader of this community of teachers and students. You don't see any animosity there, or any feeling of some type of way, right? Whereas in real life, that might have come up at a point. Um, but more than that, he's concerned with her as a person, and we get to know that about the story about their first trip to New Orleans. That
Mm.
that it's not the physicality, it's not um, the having eye candy or even a sugar mama. It's about who Genesis was on the inside that attracted him and kept him. And I think that speaks really wonderfully to the way in which the playwright made sure that these were really um, accurate portrayals of Black male and female
Mm.
um, in our communities.
Yeah.
and not the ones that we so often are inundated with that are demonized or pathologized. But that surprised me in the research when I found out and found the film about what it takes to be a firefighter in Chicago and how much they start off making. You know, I'm just amazed. Well, I always gave to the firefighters in my community because they do it for free. They're not even paid, but
Hmm.
so I don't even, there's that. But now I have even greater respect. You run into buildings, and this is how much they pay you. It's like what? Buildings that are on
You're running
fire,
towards the danger while
right?
everyone else is running away from it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's wonderful that they both serve their communities.
Hmm.
Um, so again, we're not. It's this play is not about the black expectation or the expectation of blackness that we normally see
Hmm.
on the theatrical stage. It's about the it's a more accurate representation of those of us who aren't making a whole bunch, but we're doing well in our sphere and we're trying to live out the charge we got from our ancestors
Mm.
to take one and lift up, bring
Yeah.
somebody with you. That.
Yeah. And to, to do something notable and meaningful, they're both doing it. There was I think there's some dialogue in there where it's a conversation about, like, yes, this is where you're starting out, but you're going to rise from here, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and and Genesis started out somewhere and rose to where she is. Um, and so you see that in both of them. You're just like, wow, yes. And together, they rise together and be
Right.
powerful, be the next, Obamas.
That's right. The power couple. I mean, absolutely. Because where she lives in Hyde Park, who knows? That might be near where the new Obama Library will be built.
Hmm.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, he rises despite the traumas that he's had to deal with. He wanted to be a ball player, and he lost his scholarship. He lost his ability to kind of do the thing that he had been working towards. But he found another way of still rising, of still moving forward, of still making his mama proud that she had given up her ability to go back to med school. So there's so many wonderful moments embedded in this play,
Yeah.
um, and and they're sharing those stories. So when he talks about his traumas that he had to move past, and she finally reveals hers.
Hmm.
There's a shared experience, a shared body of understanding um, that can only enhance their love,
Yeah.
and that's what makes the piece so riveting. So that when it finally comes to its conclusion, the audience jumps up
Hmm.
and applauds
Yeah.
because they need to. They have to have that release, right?
Yeah.
It's such a cathartic roller coaster.
Yeah. I feel like what resonated with me, and as I was walking away and thinking about it more, is is uh, the walls we put up
Hmm.
when we can only hear our side of a story, and the amount of effort that goes into breaking down that wall when it's simple. Like, sometimes when I get into those conversations, I'll say, um I'm not trying to discredit how you feel,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm giving you food for thought. I'm giving you more information than you had before you formed this opinion, before you received this new information. And you're telling me that with this information, you still stand firm in the position that you're currently in,
Right.
and so that that is the part that resonated with me the most, because I've been on both sides of that. On the side
Hmm.
where I can't see anything else, but on the other side where I'm arguing a point and saying like, okay, let me find some other way to do this without, and you're sort of being cryptic because you're trying to generalize. And that's what I felt like Genesis was doing. Genesis trying to generalize uh, the situation so that there could be a more common understanding.
Yes, I agree. But I also think that, she was still dealing with the shame and hurt and
Hmm.
fear and trauma
While
of her
protecting
story,
herself.
right? So
Yeah.
she's protecting herself in that moment too. There's something really wonderful in when you realize what she says. Suppose it was your daughter,
Hmm.
or and he said, "Don't go there, don't go there." But we, and to the Me Too movements that we know about and hopefully support, it shouldn't just be your daughter
Hmm.
or your sister or your mama. It should be everyone who goes through this. I should understand. They shouldn't have to work so hard for me to see their point, to see
Yeah.
their side.
Hmm.
And I think it's more that, um, than just generalizing it. We would like to believe that folks are going to be out there protesting and resisting and marching with us because every woman is a human being worth fighting for.
Hmm.
Um, but oftentimes, what we find is that only if it hits real close to home
Yeah.
are you willing to, perhaps think about it. I mean, we know we don't have to mention individuals' names, but when stories first came out that so and so had done such and such, people in the Black community was like, "Oh no, I don't believe that."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we shouldn't have to. We every human being who is uh, victimized, assaulted, who is robbed of their selfhood by another individual, we should all feel for that person because that's their humanity.
Yeah.
And it need not be a relative or a friend. And I
Hmm.
think Genesis goes a long way to try to prove that point. And in the end, she has to be brave enough to tell her story in order for Rashad to understand that point.
Yeah. It almost seems like in a sense that art puts up a powerful wall.
Hmm.
Because when you think about this situation and you can name other artists who've been in this situation, the wall that's in between the truth and our perception of the artist is the art
Hmm.
itself. And
Hmm.
so we can't see past the art they've created, or the choices they've made that we agree with, that we resonate with, to think that they couldn't possibly do anything
Right.
wrong, even though they were brilliant artists, but still.
Yeah, yeah, and and there's one cat person and that's in my head right now, so I'm not going to mention any names, but but I think we all know.
Yeah.
Um, you can love the art,
Hmm.
but still um, take issue with the position of the that the artist took.
Hmm.
And I think that's where we have the disconnect because we love the art and we respect all of the things that the art allowed the artist to do. If you also did something that was not so cool, the we as community members have the responsibility to say we loved what you did, but we don't love what you do.
Yeah.
And but that's so hard because you have these role models and these icons, and it's hard for you to see that sometimes we make mistakes, all of us,
Yes.
and some mistakes are worse than others.
And speaking of the art, uh, the set of The Light features a lot of your art.
It does. It does. When the director was talking about what he wanted, and the set designer was talking about what he wanted, I kept going, well, you could come by my house, but and then they kept going on, and, well, can you think of some places? And I said, well, sure. There's the Bloxon collection, there's the African American Museum. I was naming all of these spaces where you might see some of the things that you want to see on the
Mhm.
stage. But at the end of each sentence I would go, but you could come by my house. And then finally, one evening when we were on a Zoom call, I said, I tell you what, guys. And I took my computer and I said, I'm going to walk through the house. Just pay no attention until you get downstairs, So I'm walking through the house, and then I just go, and so here's the this room, and here's the that room, and and they're like, wait, when can we come? I've been saying this for a couple of days now. Um, but yes, I'm so happy that they were able to find some of pieces of African art, and some of the modern art that is part of the set. Um, all of the African art comes from my house, and my daughter who went to Moore College of Art and Design and then to Drexel, one of her pieces is also featured in the set. So it was really
Prominently
kind of cool.
placed. You'll see it. You'll see it. It's beautiful.
I'm not going to give it anything away. We want you to go see this play.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
everybody should see this play. I really do. But in particular, like I said, bring your significant others, because it's a conversation that we need to have in our community, and we haven't been having it.
Yeah.
We haven't been having that conversation. Um, Despite Me Too and some of the major events that have happened in the last, 10 years or so, we still won't talk about some things, and this is one of the things I think we need to talk about.
Yes. And um, I, g- I could talk to you forever, but I'm not going to because I want you to have the rest of your night. But I wanna touch on the state of African American education uh,
Ooh.
in the United States. We've been seeing a lot of news. If you're listening to the news, there's a whole lot going down in the South, particularly Florida, about just, I don't know, this, like, there's this sort of woke assault, apparently. I don't know, but now there's a conversation about African American studies that just doesn't seem to make any sense to me, and I was wondering if you could touch on that.
I think education is under assault. Period. Let me just say that from the door, and it's not just K through 12. I think it's higher education as well. Um, Education is under assault because what we've learned, which some people probably always knew, is that an educated citizenry will not stand for nonsense.
Mhm.
And so, if I could keep my citizens not ignorant, but less current, less involved, less engaged in the social, historical, and political actions of this nation, then we can slide anything by them,
Mhm.
and that's the goal. So our responsibility as American citizens has to be to push back on that. Education is a right; it's a privilege, but it's also a right. And um, as someone who teaches in higher education, I would hope that we all want our young people, our children, to learn as much as they can. So whenever I'm um, struck with individuals who are so extremist that they want to keep their children ignorant, right away that those individuals scare me.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's that. I have family in Florida, and so I'm very upset that they allowed Governor DeSantis to be reelected. That's, first of all, I'm pissed
Mhm.
that as many black and brown people are in Florida that they did not come out to the polls. They did not use the the weapon of choice. This time it's the ballot, to make a statement. Um, and we know that Governor DeSantis wants to run for president in 2024. And I think that all of these um, strategies that are being employed are to make him, the next big candidate for a very fragile um, white supremacist culture. I heard in an interview somewhere that we should be afraid because he's trying to out Trump Trump. Now, I know that's a hell of a statement to make, but right now, first the assault was on CRT, critical race theory, which is only used, and I repeat, only used in legal studies. It's only used in legal studies. It's not taught in kindergarten. It's not taught in the third grade. No eighth grader or 12th grader has any knowledge whatsoever about critical race theory. But they started with that point because they needed a watchword or a call word for everybody to go, crazy over.
Mhm.
So the call word is CRT, and now they're attaching woke to CRT, which translates anything that talks about blackness or the ramifications of enslavement have to be wrong. Why? Well, because we don't want to admit that our ancestors or this country had anything to do with slaves, despite the fact that we know it's true. We don't want to admit that. And so we have to take out, in their mind, anything that celebrates blackness or sheds a light on the African American experience. So it's moved from CRT and woke culture. Wokeness is not a thing that you can say in Florida, you get arrested. So, and now they're coming after African American studies. The assumption is that if you're teaching anything about the Black experience, it can't have rigor and therefore is not valuable. And so part of the what was passed by the education board was that it violated Florida law. They never said how or what part of the curriculum, but just the whole thing. So, um, I think that if we continue to sit back and laugh or poo poo or even just hashtag something, but aren't fully invested in the electoral process, in the elections in our communities, that we're doing ourselves a disservice, and we may wake up one day and everything has been reversed and changed. I keep telling people that we're moving towards nouveau enslavement, a re-enslavement, and they laugh at me. But if we're not careful,
Yeah,
and,
you have
and
to think about it.
uneducated people,
Yeah, if you feel like you are that if you feel like you've been standing in the same place for a long time for many reasons, how is this not like prison? You know?
yeah,
So if you're if and that's the thing that gets me about, like, when you gather new information and you don't want to process that in, you're saying you're comfortable where you are, or
right.
and you might just be afraid of what that new knowledge you know means or tells you. But yeah, you have to think about that. It's like, are you comfortable where you are?
Yeah, and when you're no longer willing to learn something new, what's left?
Yeah.
Is death the next thing then?
Hmm.
As long as we're living, hopefully we're learning.
Yes.
I would hope we wouldn't want to sit still in the same place
Yeah,
for generations. Um,
absolutely.
but there are those individuals who not with and they don't just want to sit still; they want to go backwards. Well, that's unacceptable.
Yeah, there is nothing in the past for me. I can only look towards the future. I feel like things are going to be so much brighter in the future when I continue to learn and continue to grow. And yeah, so I'm not longing for the good old days. And every time you hear that, it's like, what are you trying to say? Because they're,
Well, we know what
yes,
what folks are trying to
yes.
say. I actually collect that memorabilia as well. So that stuff's on the third floor. The signs that we would encounter when my family drove south to Fort
Mm,
Lauderdale, Florida. And so in the 50s, I've seen those signs. Now I own them.
mm.
Um, and there is a reason. Do I have one down here? I think I might even have one down here that I could show you. But I don't know if people can. Well, you can see it, but I know your audience can.
I'm going to
But
be privy to this.
can you read that?
Yes, colored must sit in balcony.
You
Wow.
know, when people start thinking and talking nostalgic about what was,
Mm,
it was tied. You know that what they're really talking about is a notion of identity where privilege was simply your physical features, race,
mhm,
um, and the fact that Governor DeSantis doesn't want school children to learn about race. You can't even mention the word race. And now they tell me that in some states, any subject matter that makes white people feel uncomfortable can't be discussed in public. Well, that's getting really close to the kind of censorship where you make people cover their eyes and their mouth.
mm.
Um, this is supposed to be a democratic nation.
Yeah.
Why aren't we all up in arms? Our democracy is being taken away from us, whittled little by little, and we're kind of going, oh, it's Florida. But it's not just Florida, because what happens in Florida happens in Texas. What happens in Texas happens in other places.
Mhm.
Education should still be the ability to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And when we stop doing that, how can we say we're educating our children?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the last 3 years have been, a learning experience. And, there is a part I do get kind of nervous where I feel like everyone is longing for it's like, are we looking forward? Are we longing for 2019 again? For some reason, it's like there are some elements of 2019, but weren't we looking optimistically forward into a new decade? And, this decade started out with, not as we intended, but we should be we should be looking forward
Right. But I
instead of
think
trying to go back to that.
what 2020 did for many people in America, it wasn't just black and brown people out on those protests,
Protests, yeah.
and that was scary for a lot of other individuals, that
Mm,
their sons and their daughters were marching alongside, um, all of these other people. That it was a very um, dynamic and inclusive group of young people who have provided the energy for some of the pushback against the brutality and the victimization and the injustices that we were seeing. And so I think that this move to keep us in a very finite sphere of education where you don't learn about the other
mm,
is so that our children won't feel they have a stake in justice.
mm,
And then if it's no longer this cadre of inclusive social justice advocates, but it's only these individuals that we've demonized, then the kinds of action that can be taken will be a lot different.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what's behind it.
Ugh.
But, for those of us who are African American studies scholars, You know, teachers have to come forward. We have to start making statements about the value of learning about others. If we're taught about Greek culture all these years later, if we're talking about ancient Greek culture from the 5th century, then we absolutely should be able to learn about Mali and Songhai and Nigeria and the Sudan and African Americans before, or Africans before, enslavement, kidnapped and brought to this country.
Yeah.
And that's
Can
what they
you
don't want us to know.
can you recommend a book that must be on our shelves?
Um, Honestly, this one, it scared me. I had nightmares. Isabel Wilkerson's Cast. Um, if you haven't read it, run out and go get it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, someone very very high up in in the university governing bodies told me about it, and I ordered it that night, and then I started reading, while it's engaging and powerful, the fact that we can see ourselves slipping backwards is what gives me nightmares.
Wow,
Yeah.
great. I would also say that I believe that is an audio form too. You can consume that if you would like. I would also suggest the 1619 project.
Oh, absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
which, by the way, is against the law in
Mhm.
Florida.
Ugh, ridiculous.
uh,
Ridiculous.
you know, not now we're not just banning books, we're banning whole disciplines. I mean, it's just
Yes.
mind-boggling to me.
Oh
It's
man.
mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to round it off, what do you hope an audience would take away from the light?
um, that African Americans are full and complete, well-rounded, complex individuals, and that the stereotype that we're often um, uh, shoved down our throats, that we get from popular culture like television and movies, that stereotype of the downtrodden and the um, the compromised person of color is a stereotype. That there are um, stories being told about individuals just like you and I,
Mhm.
and they're not, they're not what without issues and concerns, but they're full and they're whole, and like I said, um, they keep striving to be better. And I'm so grateful to this play, the playwright, the team at Theater Exile for telling this story too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Dr. Kimmika L.H. Williams-Witherspoon, superstar, long CV, justified. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. The production is The Light by Loy A. Webb. It is on stage at Theater Exile in South Philly, 1340 South 13th Street. We've been saying, come into the light. It is a great time to be in exile. The show runs till the 26th. Um, Dr. Kimmika, thank you so much for having this chat with me. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge, your energy, your love, your light. Thank you so much
Carmel, thank
for
you for
having
what
this chat
you
with me. I
do.
really appreciate it.
Thank you for what you do. And yeah, I tell all of Philadelphia, come into the light. It's not
Mhm.
just for one set of people, or it's a play for us all.
Yeah,
The more stories that we share, the more we know each other.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Want to get involved with Broad Street Review? Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com and click Get Involved at the top. While you're there, help keep us running and click Donate to find out how. Connect with us on social media, on Facebook and Twitter at BroadST Review. Thank you for helping to keep the conversation going.